Hey everyone, Jeff Lee here, taking a look today at the brand new Canon EOS R that was just announced. Now this was heavily anticipated. I think a lot of folks saw the way the industry was moving and assumed Canon was working on something, and finally here it is. So there's been a lot of coverage already on the internet, including Jeff Smith's great blog about some of the capabilities and features. Rather than diving into all of those and certainly diving into the stills features, I thought we would spend a little bit more time looking at the video elements of it instead. So as you see here, we have it kind of built up in a more sort of cinema or video shooting configuration with a follow focus on there. We actually have the ARRI baseplate that you would use on your 5D, and it fits quite nicely with the ARRI follow focus. But what we really wanted to talk about was the fact that this EOS R and the RF mount is an entire new ecosystem for Canon and what they're doing. Now, the EF system is still going to be very much an important part of their business. That's not going away. But what they wanted to focus on the RF mount was sort of the future capabilities and what that means. So as you've probably already seen, the overall diameter of the new lens mount is the same as the EF at 54 millimeters. But now the flange back distance has been shortened to about 20 millimeters, which puts the rear element much, much closer to the sensor. Since it is a mirrorless camera, you don't have that mirror assembly in the way. What that allows, of course, is for lens design to change fundamentally how they're able to place the element groupings, figure out how to get faster, high performance lenses, sharper lenses in a more compact package, similar to the 50 millimeter 1.2 or the 28 to 70 f2, or in this case here, the 24 to 105 f4. So able to position a much larger rear element closer to the sensor, changes the weight distribution quite a bit actually. So even though the lenses may look bigger than your kind of tried and true EF lenses, the fact of the matter is a lot of the lenses now have the weight shifted backwards, which is great for hand holding or putting it in a rig like this. We have it built up here also with a Atomos Ninja 5. We'll talk more about that, but we want to take advantage of some of the sort of unique output capabilities and record capabilities of the EOS R as well. Now, of course, it does have a new RF lens mount, but they are not, like I've mentioned, abandoning the EF whatsoever. There are still very much so plans for the EF series to continue. On that note, of course, because there's millions of EF lenses out there, Canon has made actually 3 different adapters to be able to use with your new EOS R. So there's a kind of traditional mechanical and electronic mount that just converts the EF to RF. There's also this really interesting EF to RF mount with a filter wheel built in. So from the get-go, they're going to come out with a ND filter, a variable ND filter, as well as a circular polarizer and a clear filter. That, of course, is great, certainly for video work, or if you're on a drone or a gimbal, you just want to keep it lightweight. Maybe you don't want to have stacking filters or a matte box. You have literally the ND filter or circular polarizer built right into the front, rather the back of the lens, so it's behind the lens configuration. And finally, the third mount option will be one that has the intelligent ring built into it as well for EF lenses. Part of the RF design is that there is a new front ring. So in addition to the focus and the zoom barrel, if you're using a zoom lens, you also now have this assignable or /programmable ring in the front. Right now we have it set to aperture. You can have it set to ISO or white balance, for example. You can change what this does in the menu. When you're using that third mount, that ring that's on the mount with your EF lenses will give you the same behavior as if you're using the RF mount. Speaking of assignable features, there is also this new multifunction touch bar on the back that both responds to taps as well as swipes. And again, being that it's multi-purpose and assignable, you can change the configuration. I have it set currently on this camera here to swiping left or right brings my audio levels up or down while in video mode. Tapping left or right brings up my focus assist tools, which is pretty clever. So now I have really at my fingertips quite a lot of functionality and options within that little touch bar. Speaking of other functionality and reprogrammable things, if you're using a follow focus or if you're coming from a different camera system, the focus barrel on the lens can actually be assigned to go kind of traditional forward or a reverse direction, depending on how you prefer to have your focus barrel programmed. And that's all built into the lens and sort of the built-in configuration on the camera as well. Now, as far as image stabilization goes, there is a traditional up-down or XY axis image stabilization if your lens has that built in. But also there's an additional feature with the video modes. You can turn on an enhanced mode, which basically is taking the accelerometer data from the gyro that's in the lens, which is being fed to the Digic 8 processor. At the same time, the image is being scanned and the blurred data coming from any kind of inadvertent camera shakes is also being read and fed into the Digic 8 processor. So what that does is actually gives you both up-down, XY, as well as yaw and roll information as well. So essentially giving you a 5-axis image stabilization for video mode. And it works really well. You know, we were testing it and we had it kind of in the worst case scenario of someone holding a camera in a not ideal position on a long lens. And, you know, we're watching the playback on the footage and it, you know, does a really nice job of smoothing out any shakes. It does punch in a little bit more, right? Because when you're shooting on this, it's not using the full 24 by 36 millimeter image size, full sensor size, but when you're shooting 4K video, it does punch in a little bit. So when you turn on the enhanced image stabilization, just keep in mind that it is using a little bit more of that data, and it's using that ancillary framing to be able to give us that additional or enhanced image stabilization. Now, as far as compression options, internally the camera does support 2 different video codecs. There is an all-eye or intra-frame compression, as well as an IPB or an inter-frame compression. In the all-eye mode at the 4K or UHD 2997 frame rate, you're looking at about 480 megabit per second as far as your data rate goes. We were also able to output, right, from the HDMI, you can output a Canon log 10-bit 422 signal, and we were using our Atomos Ninja 5 here to get a really nice clean log signal that we're then able to bring into a post-grading application and apply a lookup table or just do a really nice grade. If you want, you can also output an 8-bit log signal. When you do that, the internal recording is still maintained. However, when you flip over to a 10-bit, just keep in mind that the internal recording is disabled, so you'd have to record to your external recorder of choice. Now, one of the issues, of course, of shooting video with a DSLR was always that the optical viewfinder was blocked. Since the mirror had to lock up out of the way, you can never use the optical viewfinder. It made it especially difficult in bright conditions, or if you didn't want to necessarily make it obvious that you're recording video, have other people look at your screen. You had to rely on the screen on the back of the camera or some sort of external monitor like we have set up here. With, of course, the electronic viewfinder camera, the beautiful OLED that we have in the EOS R gives us that capability of shooting video while you have the camera to your eye, which is great, again, if you just want to prevent other people looking at your screen, or if you're just in a bright environment and you can't see your screen necessarily. It's nice to have that feature. But one of the cool hidden gems we discovered was this feature called TouchDrag Autofocus. So the camera does support dual pixel autofocus, as you would expect. It does support face detect, and you could tap anywhere on the screen and the camera will lock in and track that subject. But with the touch and drag autofocus, it's pretty neat because you can then put the camera to your eye. With the touchscreen then becomes essentially a trackpad. You can use your thumb and move a cursor around that you'll see on the electronic viewfinder, and you can literally dictate what point you want the camera to focus on while the camera is still held to your eye. And you can do it really discreetly, and you're able to select where in the frame you want the camera to focus on without ever taking your eye away from the viewfinder. So kind of a really neat feature. It's one of those things that you don't really see until you dive into the menus, but we think it's a kind of a home run feature for shooting video with the EOS R. Now, with the EOS R and the RF mount especially, I do think it might be foreshadowing of what's to come. Now, there's nothing official from Canon at this moment, but it is sort of an interesting design element, and if we were to pull out our crystal ball here and gaze into it, I think there might be signs of what Canon would lean forward to, especially with the Cinema EOS series. I, for one, think it's a good idea. Having that shorter 20mm flange back distance does change fundamentally how they design the lenses, what kind of lenses can work with these cameras, can also change the physical characteristics of the cameras that they design in the future. So you could have maybe smaller cameras mounting to or adapting to different lenses like PL, for example. Makes it a lot easier with a short flange back distance like this compared to the traditional EF mount and trying to convert that to PL. So again, nothing official from Canon, but I do think that it's very possible that since this is a whole new ecosystem and it's something that they're going to design towards the future, that we will see stuff in the Cinema EOS family probably moving towards that direction. And certainly other mirrorless design bodies like this be part of that as well. So that concludes our first look at some of the video capabilities of the EOS R and the RF lens mount system. I, for one, am super excited about what's coming in the future, what Canon is cooking up next. Can't wait to see the camera as it develops a little bit further. Hope you like some of the footage that we rolled for you guys. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more.